This is how a child is raped. In the summer when I was 4.5, my family packed up to move to South Carolina. We had lived for the past 2 years in the country on Georgia Mountain in Alabama. In fact, most of my family at one time or another lived on the mountain. There was my house, and about a football field in length up the hill was my granny and papa's house, and a little farther up the hill was my aunt, uncle, and cousin's house. On this particular day, everyone, as well as some extra help, were down at my parents' house helping us pack up the moving van. This gave me free range to explore and wander around without any real adult supervision. I wandered up the hill to my granny and papa's house, but of course they weren't there. There are 2 entrances to my granny and papa's old house. The one I took is facing the hill that I just climbed, and the other is the front door. I crossed their porch and went inside. Inside it was darker than I was used to because all the lights were off, and the only light coming in was coming in from the windows. I don't remember why I chose my granny and papa's house to wander into, but I do remember that my granny had a dish of old-fashioned candy sitting on the living room table that I loved to eat. My mom had told me many times that I wasn't allowed to ask for the candy, but I never had to because if I would stare at the candy bowl long enough, she would always offer me a piece. But today my granny wasn't here and I was alone. To my surprise, a certain man suddenly opened the front door and looked just as surprised to see me standing there alone in the dark as I was to see him. What happened next would change my young life. Past the living room and to the right, where I came in, were stairs leading down to their basement, where it was even darker than upstairs. He picked me up and carried me over his shoulder into the dark basement. He proceeded to sexually abuse me in ways I couldn't really understand with my 4-year-old mind. It started off seeming like he was playing a game with me like my cousins would. I remember laughing because it seemed like he must be joking and it felt like he was tickling me. Then I began to panic and started yelling for him to let me go, which I expected him to do because whenever I yelled normally, the person would stop tickling me. But he didn't, and what he was doing now was painful. He was behind me and it was dark, so I couldn't really see what he was doing, but he was touching my butt and it hurt and it felt wrong for reasons I couldn't fathom why. After screaming and yelling for what seemed like a long time with no one to hear me, he finally let me go. I remember storming up the stairs full of rage and yelling that I was going to tell my mom on him. And that's exactly what I planned to do, until I started walking back down the hill towards my mom and thinking about it. I remember my butt feeling very different than it ever had before, and thinking that what had just happened must have been really bad. But I wasn't sure exactly what had just happened. Then, about halfway down the hill, I started to get scared. Whenever my cousins and I would play and something bad would happen, I would usually get in trouble. Sometimes I would get spanked. I wondered if I told my mom if I would get spanked. I thought it was his fault, but I was there too, so I wasn't entirely sure if it was my fault too. When I got back to my house, everyone was still loading the moving van and hadn't even noticed that I had been gone. I have an image stamped in my mind of looking at my mom, and I swear I almost told her right then. And this would be a very different story if I had. After delaying a few minutes staring at her, I decided it didn't really matter if I told her right away, so I didn't. I kept promising myself that I would tell her eventually, not able to fathom that I would have difficulty doing that. When we moved to South Carolina, I had overwhelming feelings of guilt and strange phobias I had never had before. My mom tells me this was a very frustrating time for my parents because I kept running into the room telling them that I needed to tell them something bad that I did. but somehow the fear and pressure I would feel in the moment would always make my mind go blank. They would ask me, "What do you need to tell me?" And I would say, "I don't know." Again and again I would do this until finally they started threatening to spank me if I didn't stop. Finally, I gave up, and like so many girls just like me, let my abuser walk.
You know, it's terrible what happened to you, because it's not just a little... What happens in a small instance, like what happens in like 7 minutes in a basement with an abuser and a young child, turns into a lifetime of pain for the individual, and to a many extent, zero pain for the abuser themselves. This is one of the big reasons why rape is such a tragic thing, because it's not just this idea that, you know, there was an offense and it's a traumatic experience that sticks with you throughout your entire life. See, Hannah's my wife, and there are a lot of moments where in the morning or in the middle of the night, you know, she'll wake up and tell me about one of these episodic dreams that she's had, reliving this experience over and over again. As a husband, it's hard to watch your wife go through that sort of thing, and not being able to understand or empathize with it. All you can really do is try to support her when those things are happening, because there's really no great way to forget or to, you know, forget the pain altogether. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about this idea in our culture about children being sexually abused, children being sexually exploited, and what leads us to that place in our culture today. How do we get from this culture that exclusively would have focused at one point in time on the defense of women and children, protecting the innocence of people, and going to such lengths as, you know, no sex in movies, no foul language, all these other things focused in our culture to protect children, has now shifted into this culture that aims to, as it seems to be, exploiting children for profit, but also just for pleasure. And as a result of that, we're going to be talking about the Netflix show Cuties. This thing has gone viral in a way that is completely unimaginable. Like, you sort of have to step back in complete awe of it all and think, wow, I cannot believe that something like this has hit the mainstream in a way that has effectively attempted to normalize it. Yeah. Or at least that's what you would say if you didn't watch the movie and you just listened to all this angry content about the movie Cuties. And I'm going to go ahead and be straightforward about this. There's a lot of controversial content in this movie, and I think if you haven't seen the movie, you're probably better off not seeing it, especially if you're a weak-willed individual. But, if you do steel yourself and watch this movie, I think you're going to not have the kind of reaction that a lot of people would, because, yes, there's controversial content, but why in the world would a culture that we're looking at today, why would it surprise you that we've gotten to this point to where a major streaming service like Netflix that people pay for, up to $15 a month, depending on your plans, you'll have child pornography on it. And we say child pornography because there's a scene in there where there is someone who's portraying a middle schooler, like a 15-year-old, who does flash the breasts on screen. There's other controversial scenes, but none that can really be described as naked child on screen.
That is the most clear child pornography. That being said, there is so much content that is so inappropriate.
It should shock you into unsettling feelings. You should be mostly disturbed by this film, and I think for the most part it does a good job of that. Now, you'll hear a lot of criticism for this film about how their defense is that they're criticizing religion, Islam, patriarchal Islam, and they're also criticizing an over-sexualized culture to the benefit of men, because a lot of times you see like men enjoying The girls dancing, even though they're little kids.
Which, let's be clear, these are 11-year-old girls that they're portraying, and the actresses that they chose were of that age.
It's disturbing, and it's disturbing for anybody who's watching it. And what also bothers a lot of people is knowing that there's somebody out there who is also enjoying it, despite this quote-unquote message that they're criticizing it. The big problem a lot of people, I think, are having with this movie is that there is no outright criticism of either or. This movie takes on a structure of what I'm going to call a fictional documentary. Yeah. In other words, it's attempting to give you a slice of life look at what the life of a girl who lives in this time under these kinds of conditions is going to act. And the sad fact of it is, well, as you listen to this episode, you will find out that that's not nearly as uncommon as a lot of people would think. And we have a lot of people complaining that this is not a criticism because they don't criticize anything. They don't. They just show you everything that is going on in the world, and now you're supposed to decide, not as individuals, but as an entire culture, how are we going to let this thing stand? And if you're of the faith, if you're of any faith that wants to protect children, and I imagine there are a lot of people who are, you should be thankful that this film exists. And I'm going to tell you why before I let Hannah talk. And what it is back when I was in college, I read this book called Those Who Walk Away from Malice. And what happens in that story is there's a utopian society that is predicated on a child that is regularly abused and neglected and has to live in disgusting conditions at the bottom of the city. Meanwhile, everybody enjoys a free utopian-style livelihood. And what Cuties is, in my opinion, it is one of these people who tortures that child every day in that cell block, pulls him out and throws him in the middle of the town for everybody to look at and say, look, this is what's wrong with our culture. What's going on in our world is predicated on this assumption, on this over-sexualized culture that is now literally exploiting children. You now have bottom feeders in our society who are suffering because of our not actions, because nobody's going down there hurting that kid, but negligence of dealing with the problems that are underrooted in our society. Yeah. And what I think Cuties should be for everybody is not just this condemnatory action where we say, oh, the legal means that would have happened in here. Imagine all the girls who were exploited while they were auditioning for this film. All people who like have some kind of film experience or Hollywood experience get an understanding of like what casting is like. And I think the modern individual today just has a general understanding that, you know, casting is a big deal and we got to get a lot of people in order to audition for these pieces to find the right person. But now that the problem has been exposed, I want you guys to just look at this idea that, check this out, from the left wing of politics to the right wing of politics, we have everybody up in arms angry about this movie. Sure, you have some people on the more fringe leftist side who are, I guess, saying, oh, it's a criticism or whatever, you know, or they're more downplaying the problems with this movie. Maybe that's for convenience sake. Maybe it's because they actually defend that ideology. But
let me say, though, that if they're defending it because they think it's a criticism, then they also think something is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. They also think something is wrong at the same time. So we have this world shocker moment. And what this is somebody, say the director, for example, breaking some eggs, man. They're breaking a lot of eggs, and they're breaking them hard in a way that is disgusting and hurts people. Hurts these girls who are in the movies. But I just can't ignore the fact that now that the egg has been broken, it has fueled this spotlight moment where somebody is flashing their flashlight on the darkness out there, showing everybody, whoa, that's what's down there. You see it? You guys see it now? And in such a real way, because, I mean, to me, it almost feels like it was intentional. And the reason is because it just so happened to become this string of controversy. It's because, guys, this is a foreign film, okay? This is it's a French film, and to watch it on Netflix, I think the default is to watch it with an English dub. And for anybody who watches movies, dubs are kind of jarring because
in America we're not used to watching films that come from other countries that much.
I mean, there are some of you who do. I know a lot of people watch like Into the Dragon and all those other kind of like kung fu movies, so you'll get that kind of dubbing experience. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people these days, I think, just prefer to watch subs in those cases. But this is one of those movies, and I'll give them credit. The dub is actually pretty decent. You sort of lose sight of the fact that it's being dubbed, because you're worried about a lot of other stuff that's happening in this movie, to be completely honest with you. So when you're watching the movie, the kind of weird dubbing sort of disappears. But who would have bothered, like, without the controversy to even pick it up? Like, it would be just another flash in the pan kind of movie. Because, guys, I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of porn on Netflix. I don't mean like movies that have pornographic scenes in them that are pretty explicit. Some of them those are the focuses of the movies. They have very few views, of course, but they're foreign films for a lot of them. But they're on Netflix too. And they don't get a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that this one just goes under the radar too, especially since we have a culture that sexualizes little boys who are in drag, who go on stage for men and perform for them, and they get dollar bills shoved in their pants? Like, for a culture like that, this should be a big nothing burger. But you had this poster come out for Cuties, and it was the girls doing like a twerking scene, and it was very provocative. It definitely gave you like the sense that they were just little kids out there twerking, and it definitely gave you the impression that this wasn't a criticism. This was a movie that was about kids twerking, and says everybody on the right. And as a result, the scream was apparently loud enough for other people to be like, so everybody got a little upset. And then when the movie came out, and some people had, I guess, either pre-screened the movie for a France Film Festival or something, because it already won an award. It won some awards in a festival or something. So there were some people who were already defending it because either they had seen it or they just are apt to defend those kinds of things. I don't know. But you had effectively an entire American outrage at this. And what is it doing? It's shining a flashlight on the problems in our world. And maybe a lot of you don't feel like you need to see the flashlight, but let me just say, I really don't think this is just a flash in the pan moment. And if it dies as a flash in the pan moment, this is a spiritual failing of the highest order. Because Christians in particular, and other religious institutions that aim to defend children, should be looking at this as an opportunity to highlight, like, because normally this thing goes under the radar, right? Normally this kind of thing just kind of disappears over time. You know, we sort of, the gay pride parades, the kids marching in gay pride parades, oh my gosh. What a shit show. Man, this is garbage. I guess, whatever, June will be over soon. And then we just kind of go on and let bygones be bygones. But all of a sudden there's this huge surge of energy to protect little girls who are twerking on stage. For one reason or the other, everybody gets upset. And now we need to start pointing the finger at other things. Because you know what? It's like, listen. If you just do the conservative move, this more right-wing move of, okay, we're just gonna prosecute the illegal stuff with Netflix. We're gonna nail them for it, and that'll be that. To me, I think to anybody, that is sweeping this problem under the rug, because you have little girls who are being abused, and it goes forward and affects their regular life. Now you might be saying, "Oh, Wes, but that's already illegal." But it's still happening, and for the most part, it's being ignored. What's so funny is you can watch these commercials where there's like a gray background filing over some kids who are like crying or whatever, and it's like you read some crazy stat like in 2019 there was a multi-million-dollar industry in child pornography. And what is the sentiment? People don't go, what? When they see those commercials.
And I want to make a point here, because everybody, when you hear stats like that, you think, wow, there are some crazy places out there in the world. But the people that are most likely to be abusing the kids in your neighborhood, your own kids, your nieces and your nephews, aren't the people way, way out there. It's usually someone who's close to the family. It's usually a friend of the brother, an uncle, somebody that's trusted, a stepdad. Usually it's not that outside force that drives by in a car with candy. Although that can happen. That's not the norm.
And the crazy thing with child pornography in particular is it normalizes a consumer base, including consumers in your own communities, okay? Now, we can say that we got a red dot system that does a really good job at pinpointing people, so you can know, this is a person who's been on some porno sites with babies on them. You guys need to be careful. And why are we satisfied with that? Like,
I think what's important to note too is, sure, we have that for adults, but you have a whole nother layer to this problem. The same way we're sexualizing the little girls, we're actually also sexualizing little boys. Because I think is it age 11 that the average boy watches porn?
Yeah.
So you have all of these little boys.
Sometimes earlier.
Watching porn at the age of, say, 11, the age of Cuties. And then that's what they have in their mind of, oh, this is how we treat women as we're growing up. This is normal. And then you have them who are harassing the young girls. So it's not even necessarily all adults that are sexually exploiting girls.
Yeah.
It's also the boys who are growing up thinking this is normal. When I was in middle school, which was a while back, I think all of my friends at one time or another were touched, sometimes in really awful ways, by boys on the bus. This was in middle school. This is ages 11 to 13. And I hear their stories and they're like, oh yeah, that's just normal. It's the back of the bus. It always happens. And I'm sure it's only getting worse as our culture progresses.
This is the thing that I'm trying to avoid with this particular episode. It's that, say what you want about the issues with Cuties. So you can say it's a work of art, but it needs to be condemned for its actions, because you can make work out of art out of any criminal action. You can say, oh, it's bad to rob a bank, and then make a movie about it, and then it shows the bank robbery to a degree, glorifies it, and then you say, yeah, but that was a pretty good movie, but whoa, it's bad to rob banks, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's a different situation there, because it's not like a human.
But there are very
crime.
Similar movies to what you just described,
Yeah.
and I think people can understand that sentiment of
Exactly.
playing with an issue and then at the end being like, oh, just kidding, it's bad.
I mean, there was a time where people would get all up in arms about, like, killing in movies, too. Like, back when the horror franchise was really taking off, there was a lot of legislation coming down the pike on, like, a rating system in order to, prevent certain people from watching certain movies. I mean, we still have that rating system today, but, like, we wouldn't... And it's all pretend, right? But there's an actual crime just by the nature of videotaping children. Even for the sake of criticizing a movement, but obviously there's no real criticism there. But it is, I would say, like, it's fictional journalism,
Yeah.
This is the story of so many little girls, okay? So many little girls being sexualized early, wanting to get attention with friend groups, taking it too far, and then, there's this monstrosity issue that resolves from it. And let me just tell you guys this. Cuties woke the world up. Mm-hmm. And we need to not go back to sleep on this issue. You need to stay awake. You need to start pushing, okay? This is the time to push. This is the time to give birth to a new kind of movement that is focused on protecting these individuals, not just from this legal standpoint, though. I mean, sure, if you can, like, push to what would you call it? Criminalize pornography, like, make these pushes. Maybe you won't get it, but maybe you'll get something out of it. So, like, this is a time to push, not just politically, though, push in your culture. This should be something like, man, I don't want my kid to be a cutie. I'm going to pay attention to this girl, because something you got to notice about this movie, father is not there while all this is happening. Mother is not paying attention. There is this eerie scene, and Actually, let me do that later. We'll talk about like what's the most disturbing scenes to us, and we'll talk about those. But it's a cultural problem, guys, and you've got to focus on taking back the culture, because if you're gonna let stuff like WAP exist, if this is gonna be your top #1 trending for 2 weeks song, if this is gonna be the thing that's glorified in your culture, you better damn believe that little girls are going to imitate.
And very young little girls. Like, I mean, you have 10, 11-year-old girls out at cheer camp. What do you think they're listening to? They're going to be listening to the top pop songs. Well, what are the top pop songs? A lot of people, once they get over the age of 18, they kind of fall out of the loop. So I'm going to actually read some of the lyrics to WAP, which was #1 on the Billboard charts for 2 consecutive weeks. And it also broke the stream record. So it is huge. It is an enormous hit. And the lyrics are incredibly explicit, but this is what our kids are listening to. Let me read
so if
them.
you got kids, cover your ears.
Yeah, for real.
Cover their ears.
Yeah. So these are selected lyrics. It says, "Yeah, you fucking with some wet ass pussy. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet ass pussy. Spit in my mouth. Look in my eyes. This pussy is wet. Come take a dive. Tie me up like I'm surprised. Let's role play. I wear a disguise. I don't want to spit. I want to gulp. I want to gag. I want to choke. He bought a phone just for pictures of this wet ass pussy. Pay my tuition just to kiss me on this wet ass pussy. You can't hurt my feelings, but I like pain."
You know, this kind of vulgar focus in music used to be veiled to some degree. You know, it was kind of like a innuendo thing where an adult could maybe pick up on it, but like there's no way that a kid's going to know what's going on. But as a kid, this is teaching them words. Like, this is like, wet ass pussy, what is that? Like, what does this mean? And they got to go and look it up. And when they find it, you sexualize kids. In Cuties, this is kind of a scene I don't see people talk about, but there's this scene where the girl has already shown taken a picture of her vagina and posted on the internet for everybody to see, because she's feeling she's feeling like she's not good enough. So in order to become, more attractive, she was just rejected by somebody she was trying to entice. She thought, maybe I'll upload this and it'll work. And what happens is later that she goes to school the next day and a boy slaps her on the butt saying that, oh, she's a slut, she wants this. That's an 11-year-old boy. These boys are being sexualized by this stuff too. You're making the abusers early, guys. You're making this sick culture for boys to engage in as well. Not you particularly, but like you're allowing this culture to overtake. And you could say, oh, time to homeschool, but it's like, no, it's time to make inroads in on the culture. It's time to become people who are going to make an effect on the culture in a way that says, we've had enough of this garbage. And you know what? People always talk about slippery slope fallacy, so it's like, oh, we're going to, we'll show some nipples on the TV, but it's not going to go. The thing is, nobody ever defines where we're going to plank it at. Because the slope just keeps going downhill until somebody stops it. And the big problem is once it's going downhill fast enough, once the snowball's going really fast downhill, how easy is it going to be for it to break the barriers? So you've got to nip these things before they get too intense. And now that we've had this wake up, we've had this flash in the pan moment, time to wake up, guys. Time to start building a structure to stop this from sloping any further. And maybe with God's help, we'll be able to actually move the snowball back up the hill and maybe take some of this culture back. It's time to, you can criticize Cuties all you want, but let's make some inroads, guys. Let's change the culture. Let's use this opportunity to actually get back the culture that we want for our kids to have. Because you know what? I don't want my kids growing up in this.
And I think a huge part of taking it back is what do you do with the kids that have already been sexualized?
Yeah.
Which is
can't even imagine.
all our children.
That's you too. You've experienced this. It's so funny that people are going to get into this position where, wow, this is so horrible. I can't believe this happened to little girls. It's like, I think a lot of you will look back in your life, you women who are watching this, and you're going to look back and say, I knew kids like this at school, or I was one of these kids in school. I know what this is like. I know what it's like to feel an emotional pressure to be popular, and maybe I have to take things a step further in order to do it. I don't... This is why I say, this is a good movie to start thinking about something, okay? I'm not saying this should be like an award Academy winner. This is not that kind of movie. This is a movie to where you watch it and it should make you think, okay? And I don't think you should praise it for what it did. I don't think it, but you should at least acknowledge that in a lot of ways, without this movie, the opportunity where everybody's aware, everybody's super cognizant of this issue, and everybody's disgusted by it, this opportunity is here now, and it's thanks to this movie. So at the very least, thank God the movie exists. Thank God somebody who was torturing the little kid in the basement decided that they've had enough, and they're dragging this kid out into the public for all to see. Yep, they were the torturer. Yep, they were the person who did all the crimes. Yep, they were the person who beat this kid into oblivion. But it's out in the open for you to see. They're not trying to hide it anymore. Wake up, guys. Stop blaming the writers and directors of Cuties for your culture, because you know what? Your culture got this way for a reason. And it's because, you know what? Our generation watched this stuff. Our generation were the people who popularized it. Our generation were the ones who were telling the market, more, more, more! Give me more of this! So, who's really to blame? Are you going to blame the torturer for doing the torturing for money, or are you going to blame the people who passively let it by while they consume this content and let it get to this point?
Yeah.
Stop trying to virtue signal on this, okay? Stop trying to be, oh, what was our culture? It's us, okay? We're the problem. We're the problem. Now we gotta fix it. And I'm not just talking about, you guys know what I mean. You know what I mean. Okay, I'm good. I'm good on that. Mm-hmm. I'm good.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about a personal story, because girls have been being sexualized in this way for years.
You got another personal story? Jesus.
So, like I said, when I was in middle school, it was pretty much all my friends that were molested at some point on the bus. And that was just, my friends considered it as pre-adolescence normal. Because that's just what happened. And one of my friends, when she hit the age of 16, I know because I had just gotten my license, she got pregnant. And her mom, she told her mom, hey mom, I'm pregnant. And her mom said, well, you have two choices then. You can abort the baby and you can live in our house. Or you can keep the baby and you can go live in poor housing downtown, which is, for those that don't know about it, a very unsafe situation a lot of times.
Why is that kind of ultimatum given to a child? 16 is still child's. If it was this girl who showed her boob on the camera on Cuties, there would be outrage, okay? There's a child who's had sex and is now pregnant. This is our culture, guys. This is our culture again. And here's the nasty part of that culture. That's the ultimatum. It's not, this is tough. We're going to make it through this as a family. We're going to, you're going to have the baby. You can decide whether or not you want to keep it. We're going to support you, or whether or not you want to put up for adoption, or what we're going to do with that, but we're going to make it through this. No. The ultimatum is, okay, you kill the kid and you stay here, or you go live in public housing somewhere in downtown, and maybe you get raped. Again, maybe you get attacked. Maybe you don't have any sources in order to take care of this baby as a result. That kind of decision for a 16-year-old is like putting the pressure of the world in one hand. It's like the easy funnel. Gravity is gonna push. That choice is designed to gravitate you towards killing the baby. Okay. That's what that is designed to do. So she's going to have to, here's the funnel, guys, here's the funnel. She's going to have to climb all the way out of that funnel in order to make the other decision. Crazy, okay? That's a culture that is broken. That is signs of a culture that is broken. Go ahead, continue the story.
So she tells me, and she's really scared, which is totally understandable. I mean, she's a kid herself. Yeah. And she says, Hannah, I really need help right now. I need someone to help me. Can your family take me in while I'm pregnant? Because my family's about to kick me out, and I'm scared to go to poor housing. And so I said, okay, yeah, I'll ask my parents. And
so at this point, like, did she make the decision to have the baby at this point?
she was wanting to have the baby, but
Like, that was her gut reaction?
yeah, she wanted the baby.
Okay.
She didn't want an abortion. And so I went and I asked my parents, I was like, this is what's going on with my friend. Can we take her in? Because she's about to get kicked out of her own house. And I was actually really surprised at the answer I got, because my dad was a local pastor at the time. And he said that the square footage of our house was huge. She lived in the same neighborhood as us, but we had a nice house. And also I had a little sister, and he needed to protect my sister from her influence. And I was surprised at the answer, not because, he just said no, but because it didn't seem like we were making any effort to help her. Like, even if we couldn't take her in, if that was their decision, it seems like there would be somebody in our church, because we had a good-sized church, that would want to, and that we could make a point of finding help for her.
Sure.
And that we never did that, and that really bothered me.
So what happened next?
So what happened next was she called me up and she was crying really hard, and she said, "Hannah, I think I'm just going to have an abortion because I just can't do this." And I said, wait, just don't do it yet. And I was just begging her, just wait just a couple hours, just, give it a day or something. I'm going to come pick you up. I had just gotten my license because I was 16. And we can go to a pregnancy support center and we can see what they can do to help you. Maybe we can see the baby. And so I drove her down there to the pregnancy support clinic. And we were scared walking in because we were 2 kids and it just felt like a big legal office. And we were like, I think this is for people different than us. and they took us back and they told us right away, you're early on. We don't know for sure if we can see the baby's heartbeat. Our equipment is old. We don't have state-of-the-art equipment here. And so they try to look for the baby and see if they can find it. And lo and behold, they pull it up and you can see the heartbeat just as plain as day.
Yeah.
And we just sit there watching the heartbeat for several minutes. And then she tells me, "Hannah, there is no way I can abort this baby."
Yeah.
And no matter what it takes, I have to keep this baby.
Can you imagine what it would have been like? Like, I do this whole what would have been like scenarios, but like, what if it didn't work that day? Like, what if because there are huge blinders put on our culture when it comes to abortion, where you just go and have it. It's fine. It's a cell. It's a clump of cells. You don't have to worry about it. Some are bold enough to go ahead and admit, yeah, it's a baby. You're killing the baby, but think about your career. We got all kinds of incentives for women down that path who make the mistake of having sex outside of marriage and then getting pregnant afterwards. The crime, by the way, isn't getting pregnant. See, that's the natural part of having sex, folks. The crime, if you will, I say crime, but the immoral action is having the sex. Abstinence, guys, abstinence. This is the shift the culture took. The culture was like, well, I'll have the free sex. There's nothing wrong with kids having sex. Nothing wrong with kids having sex on camera. Nothing wrong with kids twerking their booties on Netflix. Nope. But there is a problem with having a baby, young ladies. You didn't wear protection, you're going to suffer the consequences of having to get an abortion. That'll be $500, please, tax subsidized. So,
and that was my parents' point with the square footage. I don't think I explained that clearly. The whole point was that we live in a nice house, and then I was told, because what she did was wrong, she needs to suffer for it. And so she should go to the poor housing and not be in a big house.
Yeah. Okay.
But
okay.
I know that sounds, really rough. But
we don't have to talk about it.
But I know Christians are theoretically pro-life, but I think the whole, putting skin in the game, I don't think we do that as much as we should to help people. Yeah,
I mean, you really you have to make reasonable sacrifices, folks. And if you're gonna be touting this faith along as if you're Jesus, I mean, if you're Christians, you're supposed to be representing this guy, and you don't have enough faith to stand at the women at the well and maybe offer her a hand. Come on, guys. We can do better than that, okay? But past is the past, right? So what happens next?
And actually, the story has an awesome ending. So she keeps the baby. I think her son is 12 now.
Well, that's amazing.
Um,
What a hero, guys.
and she has 2 children.
It's a
She
tough
loves
climb.
her children. And her parents didn't kick her out like they said they would. They kept her there. She ended up marrying the guy, and so she was married to him for a while. And
She never became a Christian, though, did she?
I mean, she's always claimed Christianity. She grew up going to Bible studies with me.
Oh, okay, sure.
And
So, folks, I want to take just a quick little reflection here, and just before we do that, let's talk about the most disturbing parts of Cuties for the both of us, because I think I have a different one than a lot of people are going to have. So, why don't you go first?
so, to me, what shocked me most about Cuties was that it didn't shock me, actually.
Yeah, wow.
So, obviously, dance moves just get worse and worse the farther the culture degrades. But when I was growing up, most of my friends were cheerleaders. And even as little 11-year-olds dancing around in the backyard, our moves were incredibly sexualized. And you don't realize how bad that is until you see someone else do it when you're an adult.
Yeah, when I was in marching band, there were songs that people were singing, that these aren't things that were necessarily played for people, but I imagine that a lot of people got their dance moves from that stuff. And when I was when we were in the crowds, there would be a lot of people singing the more sexualized songs, the more ones that are focused on the objectification of women. So yeah, it's strange how commonplace it is, how under the radar it goes for us. That's just how embedded our culture has become in our lives. That to where you're a high schooler and you don't even, to some degree, you don't even recognize that what you're doing is completely sexually explicit.
Mm-hmm.
This is the problem with language, is it continues to divert away from its original meaning. More standard deviations away from the original meaning. At a certain point, it's just going to become whatever. And more often than not, especially for our curse words specifically, they're just sexual. They're all sexual.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So yeah, I thought that it was incredibly relatable. As far as what the girls are watching, the moves they're doing, I'm thinking, this is all stuff you would see the girls doing at the halftime show at the Super Bowl. Why would we be surprised that our 11-year-olds are doing it? This is what they watch.
Yeah.
And we know this. Even if we're not up to date, we know this because we watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So for anybody who's thinking, well, it's just a hip-hop problem, get real, guys. I've listened to plenty of country music that's just about objectifying women. It's just slower and maybe a little less explicit. But you read between the lines, you can see it, okay? So there's a lot that glorifies it, just in different mass, different quantity, but it's the start of the slippery slope, folks. It doesn't take a lot to start the process of desensitizing people to the sexual content, especially for kids, okay? I mean, what if you have a country music video that's talking about, oh, it's a high schooler who they're talking about going out and having sex and whatever. How long does it take for that to become a middle schooler?
So the real deal is...
And why are these lines drawn between middle school and high school in the first place as if they're not arbitrary? They're completely arbitrary.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a 17-year-old who graduated and an 18-year-old who graduated? One can apparently have legal sex.
So if we're ever going to fix it for our 10 and 11-year-olds, we will have to fix it for us.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, my turn. I'm going to do my most disturbing video. So this movie is about the girl. She's a Muslim. Her dad is bringing in a second wife, so there's a huge emotional context related to why she starts going down this rebellious path. But the scene that disturbed me the most was this water throwing scene. And what happens in the lead up is the girl comes home and she just had her period or something, and it was after, so during that scene where the boy slaps her on the butt, and then he calls her a slut and stuff, and in the middle of the class, so just very brazen sexualizing this girl, she takes a pencil and stabs him and on the hand, and then the mom gets in an outrage, and then I don't know how this is related to Muslim culture particularly, but they start throwing water on her in this ritualistic way. So there's a scene where she's dealing with the problem outright, and then it cuts to this scene where she's cold and shaking and stuff. And then they're taking water and they're throwing it on this girl. Now, religious stuff, whatever. But what happens afterwards is what I thought was particularly disturbing. And while she's getting water thrown on her, she starts like shaking. Like
seizures almost.
Yeah, like almost seizures. And in the middle of like the shaking, she starts twerking and she starts dancing, she starts humping the ground. Which
again, I believe this is a little bit cultural stuff we're not familiar with. So in some places in North Africa, in Muslim culture, they dance until they're in a hypnotic state.
Yeah.
And then the religious idea is that a demon makes you move.
Yeah.
And
what's interesting is there was like this scene where like a pastor or like a imam or something comes in and he like declares that there's no evil spirit here or whatever. But she starts like it's almost like she's in a trance or something, and she's just like doing all the twerking and humping on the ground, just like vulgar, while the two women are just tossing water on her. And maybe that scene leads to that scene. I can't quite remember, but either way, it just strikes you as demonic in nature.
And they're very close up on her twerking on the ground as an 11-year-old.
Yeah, so she's in her underwear. It's really disturbing. It's very, very gross. And
it just makes it seem like, this is a pedophile movie.
Yeah, now maybe that's a cultural, there's a cultural difference between...
But still.
No, I don't mean
an 11-year-old twerking.
Right, I get that, but I mean the reason why it disturbs me extra is because there's this religious sentiment behind it, and it's a religion that's to a degree foreign to me. So but what isn't, and if you're a Christian and you look into the things that are demonic and stuff, you see stuff like that and you're like, how is that not demonic? Now you can explain it as like a hypnotic trance, and then as a hypnotic trance cultivates into her shivering and stuff, that starts something. And then her body muscles just naturally move into the twerking stuff, and she just starts doing that because she's been practicing it a whole lot, so it's like a natural thing. But it just shows how degraded it is. And somebody wrote that scene in, okay? Let's just be honest. The scene was written in. So come on. We gotta It's time to take back the culture, guys. If there was ever a time to capitalize, this is it. Yeah. Stop wasting time just complaining about it and saying, we need a legal uprising, bruh, and then we're going to let this sit on the back burner until the next sexual escalation happens, where it's not just twerking, but it's also like glorifying literal pedophilia. And in an implied sense. For critical purposes.
And when we say take back the culture, it can't just be take back the culture for the children. Mm-hmm. Because like we've said, that doesn't work. You have to take it back for the adults. Because the children will always just mimic the adults.
The snowball is too big at this point. You can't just design a culture around this stopping place. You gotta push it back. There's too much pressure. And why should it not break through, guys? Why shouldn't it? Why shouldn't it break through and just damage the entire town below? I'm doing an extended metaphor with a snowball rolling down the hill. Mm-hmm. Why shouldn't it, guys? Why shouldn't it? I think those are my thoughts, guys. Those are my thoughts on the sexualization of the culture, how it affects children, how it gets back. Guys, you watching WAP, ain't helping. It's not helping. The minor escalations, that have the more subtle escalations you see in things like country music. I'm talking about country music particularly because it's like this is the thing people don't really think about. They don't think, I mean, it's always just that rap. That rap is so objectifying.
No, it's
Give me a break,
pervasive.
dude. Give me a break.
Yeah.
There's good country music. There's good rap. There's good of everything. But you're letting this stuff slide under the radar and you just say, but I like the music. But I like the scene. But I like it when the shark eats the people. It's not enough. It is not enough.
Do you like that when your 10-year-old is mimicking those actions? When you see that?
Yeah, okay. Well, guess what? Cuties is out. Now you've seen it. What are you going to do about it? So, there it is. Cuties.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's a pretty tough issue.
Yeah, I just really hope people just get it. And maybe Maybe we won't go back to sleep this time.
Sure as heck.